This video is on how to create a mesh screen or a screening wall on the outside of the building, similar to what Morphorsis or other architects do to shade window walls. And so we're going to start with the screen mesh and how we create a simple screen mesh on the outside. In other videos I can get into more complex screen meshes. So the first thing we want to do is sketch something out, decide what it is we want to do. So I would print out an elevation of this and sketch on top of it and decide exactly kind of what I want to model before I go in here and start trying to model it. The second thing is that then let's set up, once I have an idea of where I want it, let's set up some grid lines and some levels that will allow us to put it in simpler. So I'm just going to maximize this floor plan. The first thing I'm going to do is establish where I would like it out here. So to do that, I'm going to just set in a grid line. And these grid lines can be either hidden or deleted later. They don't particularly have to be used, but it is a great way to establish a location. So I'm going to put one there, and then I'm going to put another one right here. And we'll just modify this so this is a number. We'll call it 4 since we don't have a 4 up there. And so then I'm going to come in here and establish this distance. Of course, on most times when you do these screens, what you want to do is create an area large enough here that people can get in and clean the windows and maybe repair the screen or do things to it. So you don't want it so tight that no one can work in it. Now you could put operable windows in here that allow us to come in and access the screen and the windows for cleaning, but that's much more expensive than just adding 36 inches in here between. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got a little center line here to the window wall, so I'm just going to set that to 3 feet out from the center. So probably the clear distance is going to be around 30 inches or so. Now that may or may not be enough, so you can decide, check on it. There we go. There's a little dimension right there, so I'm going to do the same thing here. And so now I've got the location of my screen here on the outside. From the sketch that I did, what I want to do is screen this from here to here to here and then all the way around to the other side, and that will cover this north wall and west wall. I'm going to put a slatted system on this side that I'll talk about in another video, and I'm going to put the mesh screen on this side. Now this is a north wall. Normally we wouldn't shade it, especially in above the tropics, because the sun isn't going to really see this wall very often. But I'm going to treat it like it's a south wall and we need shading on it. So with that done, then I'm going to come in and open me an elevation and place in a specific level, so and show you kind of what I'm intending. So I'm going to go to the north elevation here, and let's hide this element because we don't need it. We also don't need this topography right here. Well, we'll keep it just in case we want it later. Okay, so there is the north elevation. We can see we have a door over here. And my plan is to bring down, to run the whole distance and then bring it down to this line right here. In other words, not screen these. Use the screen as kind of an overhang to actually shade these windows, and also so that we can see inside the building. And so that you can see my 4 right here represents the ending of that. And so what I'm going to do is place a level in here that would represent that. So as we know, architecture levels, and I'm going to come in here and bring it right down to this mullion line right there. Okay, and of course it's using the last naming, the last thing, but that's not what I want. This is, I'm going to call this bottom of screen. And yes, I want corresponding views. And I'm going to drag this out just so I'll have it. Now, I'm going to bring it up to the top, so I'm going to use the top of the parapet as the ending point. If I had it going beyond the parapet, or maybe if I was stopping the window wall at the roof and then going to use this as the parapet in a sense, then I might set in a different level for the top of it. So the bottom is this bottom of the screen, and then top of the parapet. So let's WT back to my views here. And so now I'm ready to put in a screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is just place in a simple curtain wall system. So I'm going to close this right now. And so I'm going to place a curtain wall system right there and center it on that line right there. So I'm going to go into walls and then down here to curtain walls, and I'm going to use the generic curtain wall initially, and then I'm going to change it. So I'm going to put generic curtain wall, and I'm going to run my curtain wall from, let's get this up bigger so I can a little bit more space, from here to here. Okay. It says it's not visible. I opened a structural plan to put this in. So it says it's not visible. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and accept that, and then open a non-structural plan. I should have had actually a the top of parapet open. There we go. Much better. And I'll turn off this structural plan right here. Okay. So we put in the curtain wall, and I can see it right there. And of course, it's just a simple plane. If we go in here and look at this section, we're going to see right now that, well, we need to widen the section here. Right there. Oh, it's too high. Okay, I forgot to set the heights on it. So there's a couple of ways we can do that. Probably the easiest is just come down here and reset these base constraints. So I'm going to set the top constraint, or the base constraint, down to my bottom of screen, and then my top constraint up to my parapet, up to level top of parapet. And then I want to zero out the offsets because I don't want it to be offset any. And apply that, and boom, now I've got my, there it is right there. And you can see right now it's just a simple panel right there. And so with that done now, I'm ready to start making some changes to the curtain wall. And before I do that, I'm going to come in here and edit, and I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this a screen. Curtain wall system. And of course you can name it whatever you want it to. And I'm going to change, I'm going to say okay here, and it changed the name of the assignment to that, right? So now this is this one. So if I make changes to it, it won't change my base one. So the next thing I want to do is create some grid lines. So I'm going to close this section just so it won't be open. And to do grid lines, I really need to look at the plan of this, I mean the elevation. So I'm going to close that out, and we can see right here, there's our curtain wall system right there, right? And so I'm going to go back into elevations here. If I can find them, there we go. I'm going to open this north elevation again, and I'm going to WT it. And you can see, because I had it selected, that there's my curtain wall. Okay, and it's not transparent, but that's okay. We can deal with that. And I could come back in and make that transparent, but I'd have to do a shaded to be able to see it. But that's okay. We can define the grids. Now I'm going to make the grids a little bit bigger. I'm going to base them on the mullions so that the structural system lines up with the mullion system, because I'm going to tie back to the mullion system and stiffen those as a support system for this. And that's being done more and more today, rather than taking it all the way back to the structure, using the window wall system as a way of structuring and holding up the mesh system. So let's put some grids in. So I'm going to go architecture, curtain grid. Okay, and of course, if I move along the top of it, I can put vertical grids in. If I move along the side, I can put horizontal grids in. And I'm going to put a couple of horizontal grids first. In my original decision, I decided I was going to put an opening, okay, for view at window height, and I'm going to come back and set those heights different at the second and at the third level. Okay, so I've put those two grids in, and I'm going to go back and modify them real quickly. So what I would like is I'm going to put a couple of dimensions in here right now. So I'm going to dimension here, here, and here. And what I'd like to happen is for this to be about 30 inches. So I want this opening to be, let's go in here. So this grid line of structure, and then these grid lines represent where my structure is going to be. So I want this to be about 30 inches or 2 foot 6 inches. Let's go 30 inches. Okay, 2 foot 6. And then I want the opening here to go up to 7 feet. And 30 inches to 7 feet is about the range of a view window. And so that would be 4 foot 6. Yes. So 4 foot 6 inches. Okay. Whoop, change that dimension. Don't want that to happen. 6 inches. Okay. 5 feet. Four foot 6. Okay. And so that should total 7 feet right there. And I want to do the same up here real quickly. So off video, I went in and set those grid lines right there. Now I don't want the opening to go all the way or wrap as a band. I want it to kind of stop here and probably at this mullion right here. So I'm going to stop it at the end of the curtain wall right here and the end of the curtain wall right here. Okay, so I'm going to put a grid line in there now to represent a vertical grid. So grid, and we're going to put one right there, and I'll move it in the right place in just a second. And then this one I'm just going to line up on 0 here, or on the 1 line. So now I have a grid line that ends the window right there, and a grid line that ends the window right over here. And let's zoom in and see if we can't modify that and make it to the center of that. That would be a lot better. Yeah, there we go. And so now that's centered up. And so I'm going to have more structure in here, but at least I'll use that as the beginning. And now we're probably going to need some structure about every 10 feet. There's only certain sizes that mesh screen can be bought in, so you've got to have structure between each of the mesh screen areas. So I'm going to create some more verticals here. The horizontals are probably fine. I've probably got enough horizontal structure in there to not be concerned. So I'm going to go edit, curtain grid, and so I'm going to put one in here right there, and the same thing right in the center of that. I'll have to come back in and straighten these up. Here's the center line right here. And of course I used 2 panels right there. So I used more than 2 panels. Okay. So I'm going to put the structure on that, and then I'm going to come out here 3 panels and do the same thing here. So there's a certain level of symmetry. And then we've got structure there, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if we go over another 10 feet here, and another 10 feet here, and that leaves us 12 feet in the middle there, or 15 feet in the middle. I think that'll work. Okay, of course we can always go back and redesign it as the engineers and designers look at this. So I'm going to get this on center if I can. And this is just because I want my structure to line up with my mullions. Okay. Because why? Because I'm an architect. Okay. So we've got that, and so I think we're pretty much ready to go. So now we've got our grids in. Of course, the next thing we're going to add are so the next thing I'm going to add are the mullions to this. And to do that, I'm going to come in and actually change some of the settings within the curtain wall itself. You'll see, because it's blank, there are no mullions set for anything. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set. I take that back. I must have put some mullions in there. Okay, in the base before. So I'm going to go through and I set the interior type. Okay, the borders, and I've set them all to the largest mullion that is bettable. In another video, I'll show you how to come in and change the size and shape. Create your own profiles for these, but for right now, I'm not going to worry about that. The next thing is that I'm going to set this up as none on the vertical, because I'm going to let my grid create my mullions, or create my grid line that I already have in. Same thing here. I don't want grids created. And I'm going to apply that and say OK. And so the grids that I've already put in will remain there, but those other grids. And so now I want to add mullions. And so I've got my mullion settings there. And because I reset them, it's set in a series of mullions. And of course, let's go back to our section here. If we look at our section, well, now we see we have some structure here. The glass we can see is on basically the wrong side. So I'm going to select that whole wall, hit the tab key, flip the glass over. But actually, the glazing, or this panel, what we want it to do is move out to in front of the structure, because actually it's going to be attached to the structure. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here so you can see the panel. Let's tab here so you can see the panel right there. Okay, and so I'm going to move all of those out by changing the settings of the panel itself. So I'm going to create me a mesh panel. Okay, so I've got the panel set right here. You can see system type glazed. I'm going to edit the type, and well, I've got to unpin it, I think. Yes. So edit the type. I'm going to duplicate the type, and in this case I'm going to call it mesh screen. And then you'll see the offset right here. Okay, and the offset controls how far the panel is to the center line of the panel is from the center or the insertion line of the window wall. And in my case, this is 5 inches, so I'm going to want this to be, actually, since it's to the center line, I'm going to set the panel to be about 1/4 of an inch, even though that, of course, the panel, okay, of course the panel would not be 1/4 of an inch, okay, it would be even thinner than that, but we need to give it some thickness so it'll have an appearance in the section as it does right here. And then 2.5 inches, well, no, probably 2 5/8 because it's 1/4 of a panel, half of 1/4 is 1/8 to the center line. So I'm going to go 2 5/8 inches. Accept that. And you'll see the panel moved out. Now the panel automatically draws to the center, but it's cut in a sense by the mullion itself. Now that it's outside the mullion, it just goes to the center line, which is exactly what we want. Okay. So now we've built our mesh panel. We haven't added a material to it to make it mesh. Let's go back and go ahead and do that while we're at it. Okay, so you can see right now the material is glass, so it's going to be transparent, which is good, but we would really like it for it to be stainless steel mesh, right? Now to create your own and to create mesh, I have a special video just on materials, how to create opacity maps. You might want to look at that opacity map video to figure out to get the exact panel that you would like. But we're going to use a simple stainless steel. Okay, stainless steel. Okay, it's not in here, so it's probably in my library though. I think there's a stainless steel polished mesh. There you go. So here's a stainless steel polished mesh, so it's going to be very shiny. Of course, we can change that too. And did I grab that? Polished mesh. And then I'm going to upload it. So I've got it into my here. And there's a couple of things I think I'm going to change. First of all, the surface, when in shading, I want it to be transparent so I can see through it. So I'm going to set the transparent to about 50%. And then surface pattern, this is fine. Cut pattern. Right now I want to make that solid, so I'm going to come in here and make that a solid fill, so when it's cut it's solid and doesn't have two lines. It'll make it stand out more in this section. And then on its appearance, we can see it's stainless steel, it's polished, and you can see, not very well, but you can see, maybe if we put it in a cube it'll be easier to see. A little bit, not much. But what they've done is use these what are called cutouts, and this is basically using a procedural texture to create staggered holes, straight circles, squares, Grecian. Okay, so there's some sets. The problem is that this settings can't go as small as we really need the hole. About as small as hole as you can get is about 1 inch or something like that. But I'm going to accept this right now just so we can see. And like I said, to create a more appropriate mesh, and in one of your design or whatever, you need to go to the video on materials and mesh materials and opacity maps. Remember that word, opacity maps. So I'm going to apply this though while I'm at it and say OK. And so now we've got that material as a mesh. But when we're in a shade mode, we'll be able to see it through it because it's going to be transparent. And so I'm going to apply that, say OK. So now if we go back to our wall system, we can see our mullions right there. Here's our panel that we've put in, and then let's go see if we can see this three-dimensionally. I'll WT this. Here we go. Okay, so we can see right here, and of course this is in a shade mode right now, I think. Yeah, it's in a shaded mode, so we're just seeing it as transparent. If we go to realistic, we'll actually see the perforated skin. Okay, and this will render as a perforated skin. Now, as I mentioned before, the smallest size you can get is pretty. This is not either dense enough or small enough to really create good visual effects through it. But it is a good placeholder until you go to the materials opacity map mesh screen tutorial and replace it. And I recommend that you do that. Okay, so now we basically have our mesh screen. We could come back, of course, and add materials, but I forgot one thing. Let's go back to our elevation, north elevation, and we'll just maximize this. And I've got it in shade right now, and of course we can't see through it. You'll notice also we don't see our mullions because they're behind the screen, right? We push the screen out, so we're just seeing the dividing line between the screen. But what we want to do is remove these panels where we want to see straight through. And to do that in a system, you just can't delete them. I'm going to tab here till we get the panel I want. For instance, I want to remove this panel right here. So I've got to unlock it, and then I've got to come over here and tell Revit that the panel is empty. Okay, and so now there's no panel there, which is exactly what I want. And the same thing here. Unlock and set the empty panel. Okay, so now we have empty panels, and I want that completely from here. I'm going to go offline just for a second and do all that, and then come back and show you the results. So now I'm back. I've done all the panels except for this last one. I'm just going to repeat it again so that you can see it. I'm hitting the tab key here, of course, to cycle between selections, and I'm going to select that, unlock it so I can change it, edit, not edit the type. I want to edit and make it empty. Okay, and so now we kind of see our finished results here in the elevation. I'll just close that out, and we'll close the floor plan out, and let's go to, we've got kind of on realistic mode right now, and we can see now we have our opening. There's our perforations, and it looks like the way I want it. In another video, I'll cover how to create the structure connecting this. If I go back and show you the section, building section. So right here, you can see that it's not connected back. There's no connection back to the structural system. And so what I want to do is create a connection back and a platform for people to work on. In another video, I'll show you how to create that platform, or one way to create it. There's multiple ways. Okay, that's the end of this video. The next one I'm going to cover how to create a screening wall with slats on the outside. They could be either wood or metal.